sour-faced.
How about global thermonuclear war?
Ah! You don't scare me. Work on it.
All right, before we bring on our guest here, our esteemed guest, I want to tell you about Sprigs and Twigs. They are the best landscaping company that I've ever dealt with. And, you know, here's the thing. They're nationally recognized. I mean, there are a lot of good companies that are locally recognized. These guys are nationally recognized. They do huge projects. They do small projects. They certainly can do whatever it is that you want, whatever you can conjure up. Or if you can't think of something that you want to do specifically, let their team come out and take a walk around your property, tell you what they would do, incorporate all of the the cool ideas that they have with some of the thoughts that you have. They'll go away for a couple days, come back, and present you with a landscaping plan that is second to none. Call them today at 860-235-0752 or spriggsandtwigs.net. Like I said, landscapers, lawn care, and tree care, there is nothing they cannot accomplish. If you want to make your home that toast of the neighborhood where people walk around and say, oh, look, there's Jimmy's house, man. Oh, man, it looks great. Well, you go call Spriggs and Twigs today, 860-235-0752. We've used them. Again, I've told you the story before, but this hill we had, which was overgrown with everything, couldn't fix it. They came in a couple days. It's now been like an amazing thing to look at for the last 13, 14 years, and it's really low maintenance. Good stuff. 860-235-0752. Give them a call today. And again, this is one of our favorite people to bring on. He was for the longest time with WTNH and a whole bunch of other places. Now he's got a fantastic podcast that if you can listen to it every day, you will be better off. And our friend George Colli is joining us. George, good morning. How are you, man?
You're a good man, Lee Elci. I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing?
So tell everybody how they can listen to the podcast, and we'll do that again at the end. Tell everybody where they can get it.
It's gcolli.com. Gcolli, like the dog without the E.
Yep.
And every day, what I've been doing is Monday through Thursdays, and then with news breaks over a weekend. It's anywhere from a half hour to an hour and a half or 2 hours, depending on the news of the day. But just trying to going over the headlines of the day, going over how state government's being reported, how politics are being reported, how local news is being reported. And what I'm trying to do is focus less on the political reporting and more on the government reporting.
Right.
Is the government doing and saying what it's saying it's doing? Or is it saying what it's actually doing? And, this Lamont administration and this state government, it seems to be a lot of just kind of PR manufactured, whatever they want to bring up that day isn't necessarily the truth. And so try to call it out, try to ask questions that maybe aren't being asked, maybe give a little bit of an alternative headline that maybe you're seeing elsewhere, but just trying to make people think and try to hold government accountable. A lot of what you've been doing every day of your career, but it's just, I don't know if there are enough voices like yours out there, Lee, that are really kind of holding their feet to the fire. So I'm trying to do it online, and it's, I've been doing this for about 7-8 months now, which I think is longer than many may have guessed. I could have kept it going. And, it's a business, so you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out where you can monetize it. You're trying to, I want to hold firm to kind of my principles and what I promised people at the beginning, and have so far. And now it's just trying to figure out how to keep it going for the long term.
Well, good for you. I think you're doing a dynamite job, and I think people, if they can, carve that time out during the course of their day, they should, and they should, log on to that and find out more about it. And we'll get all that information again at the end. Well, since you brought up the governor, let's stay with the state government first. I do want to ask you about some of the bigger news issues that have hit us here in the last 72 hours plus.
What a week.
Huh? Oh my God, it's been crazy. But let's go to the governor first. And you talk about transparency or holding people accountable, and you've been trying to hold the governor accountable. And I was having this conversation the other day with somebody. Why do you think all of the stuff that we have been talking about, and you've been part of this from the beginning as well, about Semaphore and some of these other what seems to be very unscrupulous or shady dealings with the governor, why hasn't anybody taken this ball and run with it? Why is it something sort of on the outside and not mainstream?
I mean, I don't know. I asked that question, Lee, to myself. I asked it in private conversations. People just don't seem to care, and maybe there's just way too much going on in people's lives right now to worry about the inner workings of state government. I think a lot of people are just happy. They feel that Ned Lamont kept them alive during COVID. Now, I don't believe that Ned Lamont did anything to keep anyone alive. but there are people who truly believe that. And I don't know if you're going to change them right now. I mean, I think that people have kind of dug their heels in, with COVID the same way they may dig their heels in with abortion, or
Right.
they dig their heels in with guns, and they're wearing their red hat or their blue hat, and they're not going to see a different way. But man, it seems the biggest thing that I've been on here for the last couple of years, but really over the last few months, is my biggest concern with media and government is there seem to be these media partnerships. Yesterday there was an agreement between a media company in Connecticut and a local government where they're talking about it being companionship. I mean, I believe that there should be no partnerships between media and government. I think we need to be skeptical and question everything they do and say.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that that you don't agree with what they're doing. You just need to question them. You need to find out if what they're actually saying is the truth. And I listened to your interview with Tony D this morning, and have for a year and a half now, with him talking about semaphore and all the other inner workings of it. I mean, you're talking about a government official family,
Right.
making tens of millions of dollars off of state contracts and mandatory mandates, and then not answering it, and then not giving you the information, then never calling it a conspiracy theory and just dropping it. And in Connecticut, it just seems like this administration knows that they may get to ask the question once, but they're not going to be asked it a second time. And I believe in media that you ask the question until you get an answer, and then there's another question you may have. And if it takes a year and a half to get them to answer a question about semaphore, then you keep asking for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And eventually they will have to answer it. Maybe eventually people will understand why it's important.
To your satisfaction, have they answered that question yet?
No.
Of course not,
He
right?
still says it is through the comptroller's office, which we know is not true.
Right.
We know that Governor Lamont was doing press briefings, and Josh Jabal was giving quotes in press releases months before about semaphore, partnering with the state months before the comptroller contract. And so the idea is it's just not true. What they're saying isn't honest. And Lamont's tried to change his answer a little bit, where now he says, "Oh, well, we needed testing. I'm proud of what we did. We had to get the testing," which, yes, we did. But that's not the answer he's given for a year and a half. The answer he's given for 2 years it has been that it was all for the comptroller. He had nothing to do with it. Now, the reason why he gave that answer is, I think, because ethically, his administration should not have done anything, lobbied for anything, put anything in place that would benefit the Lamonts financially.
Right.
And so he's had to watch himself. But the media lets him give this answer, and then nobody talks about it again for another couple months.
Now, is there a responsibility to people, his opposition, to bring this out, to bring this to the attention of the media, or is the media so in the bag for the governor that it doesn't matter what they do? In other words, if Bob was to continuously talk about some of this stuff, would it fall on deaf ears? Would the media not pick it up? If he held a press conference, would they not care? What do you think of that?
I think the only time that media has picked this up is when Bob Stefanowski's brought it up.
Right.
He brought this up. That first op-ed was you and Tony D'Angelo back in,
right.
A year and a half ago. Right. Then a bunch of us kind of picked up on that and have carried it along with.
You did a great job on You did it for a week, 2 weeks. You talked about it every day.
There's a lot, and it's and you just try to get out the information. But it wasn't even mentioned really in the media until Bob Stefanowski wrote an op-ed last October,
right,
which was in the Hartford Courant, where he really hammered it home. Now, it took about a month, maybe 3 weeks, for the Courant to actually post that op-ed. It was in a Sunday paper. It took about a month for them to actually post it online.
Yeah.
And at that point, you saw CT Mirror, you saw Hearst, you saw the Hartford Courant. They all were doing their semaphore expose.
Right.
The big one being Dave Altamari's. I think it was November 22nd of 2001, for those who want to Google it. And the idea is they kind of put it out there, and then it just dropped again.
Yeah.
There was a timeline that confirmed everything you and Tony had been saying and things that I had found and had pushed. But then it's just like it gets dropped again. And so, we haven't gotten an answer from the governor yet on this. I think that at some point he's going to have to give an answer.
Right.
We just haven't gotten it yet. But I think the only way at this point that it comes out is through candidates. But the problem that the candidates have is Google any Republican that's running for state office right now. the comptroller, the Secretary of State, Attorney General.
Yep.
You can't find an article with their name in it from the last month on Google, from the last week on Google. And so I don't know where it is that those candidates will be able to get that stuff out. Stefanowski has the platform.
Right.
But he, at this point, seems to be the only one that anybody in the state is even mentioning is running for office right now. And I think Bob does a good job of it because he's an honest guy who has integrity. And I think he asks the questions that many of us have, which is, how is this possible?
Right.
And how can this happen? Why is nobody concerned about this? So, yeah, I mean, I think that when you have campaign commercials and you have press conferences and you have a media that's asking the question, I think it could come out. But at this point, that seems to be the only place maybe where it would come out because they're just not getting coverage on it in newspapers. You're not getting it on television stations. You're hearing about it on some radio shows. But I don't know where these Republican candidates are going to get their word out. And that brings us back to where we started, where I think that what I'm trying to do with my site, what I know you do with your show, is you give these candidates the chance to bring this stuff out to an audience, as well as hear from the listeners, which is the most important thing that we can do is hear from the people. And so I have faith that the truth will eventually come out. It sure seems like there's a lot of stuff being buried here heading into the election, but we're going to do everything we can to keep asking these questions and at least get people to be curious about it. Because I think that's really needed at this point is just a little more curiosity, certainly from the media and I think from a lot of the public.
I certainly, and George Colli is our guest, and we appreciate him coming on today. I hope that the electorate hasn't just become complacent and apathy has set in, and they don't care. You'd mentioned in the beginning they feel as though maybe they owe the governor something because, quote unquote, that he saved their life in the beginning, when actually it's the exact opposite. If you look at the numbers,
He's told them that.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I mean, and the media has repeated it
I know.
over and over and over. We're ranked 43rd in the country in terms of COVID response.
Right.
When you look at everything, 43rd. I mean, is it 50th? No. Is it the best in the country that the governor says over and over?
Right.
It's certainly not. And so I just, I mean, if and also I can't understand a guy running on COVID.
Right.
I mean, could you imagine if Dan Malloy spoke about Sandy Hook as much as Lamont tries to take credit for how he handled COVID?
Right.
I mean, Malloy would have gotten completely run out of town for doing that.
What does he run on, though?
We've got over 11,000 deaths in Connecticut, and Lamont's running around and talking about how great he did. I was in those nursing homes in March and April and May of 2020, helping Stefanowski's and the Masks for Heroes group, bring masks to the nursing homes and the hospitals. Let me tell you, Ned Lamont did nothing to help those people. I mean, the Lamont administration was telling the media that the nurses wanted to wear trash bags, that they want to wear trash bags over their body because we don't have the proper equipment. And but I mean, I think it's insulting. I think it's insulting to those doctors and those nurses and those cops and those EMS and anybody that had to work on the front lines, whether it was a gas station or a coffee shop or wherever. It's just I think it's really insulting when you think back to what it was like in those months and just how unprepared and this administration was. They want to tell you they did everything great with COVID. Well, they didn't bring PPE in until May 17th, which is the end of the first wave. And according to Ned Lamont, we didn't get testing until May 20th when that comptroller contract was signed. So we missed the whole first wave, apparently, with testing and with equipment. But we did great with COVID.
And there was a scandal surrounding that, right? Wasn't there a scandal?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, go on, Lee.
No, I said there was a scandal with a picture being taken with stuff that wasn't actually didn't actually arrive, right? Am I remembering that right? Was that?
Well, there was they played it again over this past December when we had the Omicron surge, but they kept on saying the cavalry's coming, cavalry's coming, the PP is coming, the cavalry's coming. They said that for all of March. Then the end of March they come out and they go, the cavalry's not here. It's stuck on the tarmac. Right. That's what I meant. Which then, when it did come in, 5-6 weeks later, Lamont and Jabal were saying we got to the front of the line. In the meantime, Stefanowski was buying 100,000, 200,000, 300 masks a pop, driving 2 hours down to Jersey City and bringing it back by the afternoon.
Right.
And so they did the same thing this past December when they were talking about how it was on planes and it was on trains and it was on trucks and it was out west and it was the middlemen, and it was the negotiators, and it was supply chain issues. And they said that they saw pictures of the PPE,
right,
or of the testing kits that were going to be coming in. They made it up. There were no pictures. It came
right,
out 3 days later that the DPH commissioner completely made it up. She has not been held to account for anything that she did when she lied to her face during the biggest surge that we had here in COVID last December. The governor, for the weeks leading up to that surge over Christmas, was running around for digital passports, vaccination passports. He spent 2 weeks on digital vaccination passports. He didn't want to be in a room with you unless he handed over your medical information to the doorman before you walked in. All right? How far has that gotten us now? I mean, how many restaurants ever ended up using that, wanted to have private businesses determine whether you could enter a place based on your medical history? As people are protesting today about abortion and my body, my choice, Ned Lamont fired people for not abiding by his medical mandates.
right.
And so, all of the my body, my choice, crying right now that we're getting out of the administration, you know what? They gave up my body, my choice. They gave it up with their mandates for this vaccine, which, you know what? Get the vaccine. It's your choice. But you know what? It's a choice. This vaccine doesn't stop you from spreading this virus. It doesn't stop you from getting it. So to actually fire people based on something that doesn't stop the spread or doesn't stop infection, you know what? It's just political show. And, I think it's why you have people like Ron DeSantis gaining real steam in this country, because they're actually willing to stand up against the mob. Here in Connecticut is where they're holding the mob's bullhorn with people like Lamont and Bob Duff and some of these that I don't really know how they get away with saying what they say, but they do. And it's, we can get into other scandals that they're not talking about, from Casa Diamantis to the New
Right.
London State Pier to hazmat abatement project
Nonstop.
to, the list goes on and on and on.
It's nonstop. And, I was just going to say to you, too, can you imagine where we would be right now had the government not given the state of Connecticut, the federal government, all this money? This would be a disaster. Like, we would have, economically, we would be in an absolute free fall if there wasn't federal money. And he goes around touting as if somehow this is a wonderful place not only to do business, but to, we're doing a great thing and we're giving back money with taxes and all this. We would be so much in the red if it wasn't for the feds giving out, giving candy to these states to make everybody happy. It's crazy.
And they run around tweeting about fiscal responsibility,
Right.
hashtag CP different. All right, listen to but they're giving you $635 million back in tax cuts, despite the fact that next week or this week we're going to be at $8 billion with a B, $8 billion in budget reserves.
Right.
They're giving us back in tax breaks 8%. They start talking about fiscal responsibility, about how historic tax cuts they're giving back at $635 million. We've been, the only thing historically is we have been historically overtaxed. Either this has been a complete 100% Uncle Joe Biden bailout,
Right.
which I think is what it's been,
Yeah.
or we have been historically overtaxed, or both. And so the idea is, as they run around and tell you about the $635 million in tax cuts, remember that there is another $6 to $7.4 billion that they've overtaxed us by.
Right.
And the reason why they keep overtaxing us is so they can put this to the union, either in bonuses, either in raises, or in paying off the union pension. If the rainy day fund gets to a certain point, anything above that needs to go to pay off union pensions. All this money that's come in for small businesses, for daycare, for health care, for all these things, guess where it's going? It's going to union pensions. And it's, that's another thing. I mean, everybody, if you read the headlines, Google Lamont historic and see how many headlines there are about this milestone signing or this historic thing. It's straight from the governor's press release. It's not historic. The only thing historic is how historically we've been overtaxed under this administration. And if it wasn't for the federal bailout, God knows where we would be. I don't know where we're going to be a year from now or
Right.
2 years from now. It certainly isn't looking good with the way this
I agree.
the way this economy is going.
I agree.
And I'm guessing it'll be a whole different story next year. They'll be blaming Republicans in Congress or something, but they won't take credit for it. They won't say it's anything they did.
George, we're going to run out of time, so can you give me 90 seconds on abortion real quick?
Yes, I I don't think this was a surprise. I think anybody who paid attention to the hearings that they had, the Supreme Court had on this back a few months ago is not surprised by this decision. I'm torn on it. I mean, I have raised the Catholics. I mean, I have a faith life. I think when you ask me about my own personal decision, I know where I stand. I also have a very difficult time with having the government make any sort of medical mandates or decisions for people. That's something I truly believe the government needs to get the hell out of our medical business. And so, I certainly am torn by it. I think it's something where, depending on your own life experience, is where people feel about it. It's the same thing with guns. I think with guns, you look at, people, whatever makes you feel safe. And some people feel safe if you take every gun and bullet off the street. Other people won't feel safe unless they're armed to the tilt. You're not going to change that. If you've been mugged, you may want a gun before you go outside. If you've had a kid shot in school, guess what? You want every bullet taken off the street. And I've talked to people on both sides of it and get it. But when it comes to abortion right now, obviously here in the Northeast, this isn't going to impact us at all. I think that this is going to, the federal government, Congress, could have secured these rights at any point over the last 50 years. They could have codified abortion federally by law. They didn't. That was with, right now, there's Democratic president, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. Joe Biden and Congress, if they wanted, could solve this problem today. They're not doing it. They haven't done it over 50 years. They would rather use it as a divisive issue to try to get people fired up for an election instead of actually doing what they could do to protect those women's rights who are outside protesting right now. So I look at it as, I understand both sides of it. I know where I am personally. But the government, if they really wanted to do something, could right now. The Democrats are in charge, and they're not. And so I think that is what I've been paying more attention to. Is what the government's actually saying they're doing and what they're actually doing. And they're not doing anything on this.
George Colli, tell everybody where they can find you. Where do they go?
gcolli.com. Sign up. Listen to the past shows. It's a $4.44 a month. You could get a yearly thing for $44. Hopefully we make you think. Spread it. Retweet it if you agree with it. Yell at me if you don't. Get the engagement going. And Lee, I can't thank you enough for giving me this episode.
All right. Are you getting ready for football season, by the way?
I can't wait, man. I'm loving baseball this year. I mean, I've been spending time between New York and Connecticut, so I've been watching. I'm a Red Sox guy.
Yeah.
But, man, these Yankee teams.
But you're also a guy. You're a guy who likes to make your picks, too, don't you? Don't you make
I enjoy the I like
All
making a few picks. And, I've enjoyed just going with the Yankees and the Mets, and over the last few weeks, the Red Sox.
If you've been doing that, you've been winning. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're eating this week.
Oh, there you go. All right, brother. We'll talk about that down the road for sure. I got to run, though. Thanks, man.
Sounds good.
All right, George Colli, check him out. Coming up next, State Representative Greg Howard. Stick around.
Traffic alert on 94.9 News Now.
Our final check.